Hi and welcome to Maths class. Today we're looking at determining rules for graphs of circular functions. So what we're specifically looking at are sinusoidal functions such as sine and cosine graphs. We're not looking at tan graphs, and one of the properties of these functions is that they have a bounded range, which helps us to learn what the amplitude is. And also we know that if we know the period, then that helps us to work out what the coefficient of x is going to be. So there are two key things that we know how to use. We're going to always use f of x equals a sine of nx plus epsilon plus b. And the reason that we always use sine is a cosine graph is basically a sine graph translated to the left. So I can always rewrite a cosine graph as a sine graph, as a sine function, okay? So we're going to look at 4 examples. The first one you can see right there. It has no horizontal or vertical translation. We're going to look at 2 examples like that. Oh, sorry. One with a vertical translation, and then we're going to look at this function, which you can see has just the vertical translation, but we don't have a graph, we just have some key information. And this is going to be my last example, which is an example that has a horizontal translation. So I'm going to go through those 4 examples, and I'm going to do them in 2 separate videos. So the 3rd and 4th examples will be on a separate video. So example 1, I need to know the graph for this function, and I can see already just by looking at the graph, it's centered around the x-axis. That's our midline, our center line, and it goes up to 3 and down to -3. So I can easily see that the amplitude of this graph is 3. The other thing that I can see there is I go through one complete cycle. I start at the origin and I finish at x equals 4, which means that the period is 4. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use this version of my equation, y equals a sine nx, because I don't need a horizontal translation and I don't need a vertical translation. So I'm just going with this version here. So I need to find a and I need to find n. Now a is easy, it's going to equal my amplitude, but n, it's pretty easy. I'm going to use the fact that I know the period equals 2 pi on n for all sinusoidal graphs like this, and I know that that equals 4. So now I just solve 2 pi on n equals 4, which is going to give me n equals 2 pi on 4, which is pi on 2. So I know that n is pi on 2, and I know that a is 3, so I can now write my equation. 3 sine pi x on 2, or pi on 2 times x. And that's my first example done. So let's look at the next example. It's still fairly easy for me to just, oh, there's a mistake in that example. Hang on. I'll just fix it straight away. That's meant to be -3. All right. So it's fairly easy for me to look at this graph and to read off my amplitude, because I can see that from my center line here, I need to go up to get to the maximum point, and I need to go down to get to the minimum point. So that means that the amplitude is 2. There is another way I can look at this though. If I wasn't that confident, or if I didn't have whole numbers, I can simply go, the amplitude is going to be the maximum y, subtract the minimum y, and I'm going to use this equation a little bit later, and then divide it by 2. I divide it by 2 because the maximum minus the minimum will give me this distance here, but I only want half of that, so I divide it by 2. So that's just going to give me 1 minus -3 over 2, which is 1 minus -3 is 4 over 2, gives me an amplitude of 2. Okay, But because I'm given the graph, I can see it very easily. The other thing that I can see quite easily is the period, and that is 10, because I can see that I start here at 0, -1, and then I go to 10, -1, which means I've got a period of 10. All right, I've started at x is 0, and I've gone through a complete cycle when I get to x is 10. So my period is 10. So that means 2 pi on n equals 10, which means n is 2 pi on 10, which is pi over 5. The last thing that I need to look at is that I have a vertical translation. And because my center line is marked, then I can see that my vertical translation is -1. So I'm now going to use this form of the equation, y equals a sine nx plus b. The b will give me some vertical translation. That's the only difference from the last one that I did. My amplitude is 2. N I've already worked out is pi on 5, so pi on 5x. And then I'm going down 1 on my graph there. So I just go -1 and I'm done. All right, I'm going to stop this and I'll start a new video to do examples 2 and 3.